Alrighty. We're going to talk about something. We're going to talk about something. Um, my 8 viewers, 10, I don't know. But today I want to talk about if you actually do want to be loved. Because I know a lot of people say that they're missing a lot of love and a lot of affection in their lives, especially guys, but girls too. It's different for girls. I want to get into that as well. Yeah, I'm going to get into that right now. Oh, train tracks. So, guys typically it's very much more like upfront about it's a lot more blunt when you think about like guys don't typically feel love, right? Like it's just a numbers game in their head, you know. And typically that's how it is for a lot of different facets in guys' lives, right? It's all a numbers game. Like it's all about the physicality, like how many people are there. Okay, and for girls it's a little bit different because they get a lot more interactions, but they don't exactly care for the interaction. It's not a numbers game for women. For girls, it's more of an authenticity game. So, and this kind of makes sense. Oh, someone turned their brights on. Never mind, turned them off. And it kind of makes sense too because for guys, like we do count like the authentic interactions, but typically, I would say typically the interactions tend to be more authentic, at least from my experience. When I'm looking for someone, and it takes a while to actually even like find someone. Again, like playing the numbers game, but those interactions tend to be more authentic. It just typically takes more time. And this isn't for every guy. And I would say maybe the vast majority of guys, it's just a numbers game. But I suppose I'll speak it from personal experience. But anyways, so also for women, they tend to have more interactions, but they don't get like actual love from the interactions. Okay, they don't get like actual love from the interactions because it's all kind of inauthentic in a way, So yeah, they do get more day-to-day interactions, but typically, if you're working in maybe like a more corporatized job where they're around a lot more like leadership and maybe even more powerful people, like they're getting their interactions from older guys. Okay, they're getting their interactions from older men who, like, if you know anything about older men, like, it's very creepy and weird when you kind of see those interactions unfold. Like I'm kind of getting weirded out just looking at it. And it's not just older men, but that's just an example of the inauthentic love. Because everyone is chasing love. Everyone thinks, well, women have most of the love, but they just kind of spoil it. They just kind of let it go, right? Excuse me. But really, it's not authentic. And, I can kind of see that from a standpoint of, maybe I thought there's someone in the road. My eyes are playing tricks on me. Maybe you're amongst a group of friends, right? You're amongst a group of friends, but, like the friends, but they don't really know you. That's how I imagine that kind of inauthentic love that women struggle with, And so now I want to get into do you actually want to be loved? Okay, because for the longest time I thought I did want to be loved, but it's not that simple to just stumble upon love, right? Because love requires a lot of commitment, sacrifice, and all that jazz. Which I don't know if a lot of people are willing to put up with that, because think about the vices that you have in your own life. Like if you struggle with pornography and you think, okay, well, it's pixels on a screen, but once I actually get like a physical body in front of me and not just, pixels on a screen, then everything's going to clear up. Realistically, sorry, I'm going through a roundabout. I gotta pay attention when I'm doing this. I don't want this guy to follow me, so I'm just gonna keep going. Guy better not be following me, let's say. So like, you might be thinking, well, okay, well, if I get like the physical person, then my pornography addiction is just gonna magically go away. Which might be true, but that's not even the heart of the issue. That's not even the root cause of the issue. The root cause of the issue is how you find love, where you find love, and it's going to be very kind of transactional. Okay. It's going to be very kind of transactional. I don't speak about this from personal experience. Believe me, I'm not a ladies' man and all that jazz. But come on, tell me I'm wrong. Yeah, it's not gonna be, yeah, it will get rid of your pornography addiction, I imagine. But I don't, at least I don't want to get into that stuff. But because you'll still struggle with it. Even if she doesn't meet the needs of you, or maybe you guys get in like a fight or an argument or whatever, and that stuff just isn't happening, for whatever reason. But you end up falling back on it. And I've heard women's perspective on this as well, where the women say, they kind of feel insecure in a way, because it's like, I'm not good enough for you, or kind of feels like they're cheating in a way. And if you think about it, it kind of is like they're cheating in a way. It's like soft cheating. It's, I would say it almost hurts more than cheating. Or maybe it's like kind of, you can equate it to actually cheating, because unlike actually cheating, like it's a real commitment to it. But pornography, it's not a real commitment. So it just kind of goes and goes and goes, because no one really takes it seriously. And I would say that's even more harmful. That's even more harmful because it lasts longer. And honestly, you'll kind of endure more pain because of that, right? Dude, these roundabouts really got me hyper-focused here. And all that jazz. But yeah, like it's, I don't agree with a lot of women. I think women's opinions are, interesting. Might cut that part out. But yeah, I would have to agree with women on this section. Where it's like, man, I really do find understanding and understand like where they're coming from. Because it really is like, hey, are you cheating on me? Like, I can't really do this anymore. Are you, because I can imagine it if like a woman is, flirting with another man in front of their man. Would you call that cheating? Kind of. Would you call pornography cheating? Kind of, yeah. I would say so. So that's just my 2 cents on it. But that's only one though, because there's a ton of other vices that you have to be willing to drop. I know not a lot of people would like to agree with this. Video games. Video games are And believe me, I played the crap out of video games, and sometimes I still do. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like occasionally playing. I'm talking about like hyper obsessive over like the gaming scene, rather than just maybe like an outlet, or maybe just something to pass the time. I'm saying like really just being hyper competitive, because not only are you being like hyper competitive over something that has perceived value, but really you don't get anything from it. You're also wasting a ton of time, because you are getting that gratification of hard work, but you're not really getting anything in return. And I know growing up for me, it was like, yeah, like they were spewing that, but then there was a section in your life where it was like, well, I can actually get into like esports, or no, I can actually like make YouTube videos and make money off it. Dude, let's be so for real right now. That stuff's like not happening. That's like me getting into football. Never played football, but that's like me getting into football saying I'm going to be in the NFL. It's so oversaturated, and I don't want to say like be more realistic, but like let's be a little bit more realistic, And I don't want to come from the standpoint of like condemnation, but man, it's kind of hard not to. It's kind of hard not to, and getting into the next vice for men and women, smoking weed. A lot of people would like to say, well, smoking weed is actually good, because I watched it one time on like this Joe Rogan podcast. Joe Rogan definitely did popularize that standpoint of smoking weed actually isn't bad. It's part of nature, this, that, and the other. It's actually natural and all that jazz. There's a lot of things that, don't seem on the surface level to have harmful effects, but they don't have harmful effects on the front. They don't have harmful effects up front. They don't advertise it up front, but it's the harmful effects later down the line. Like video games don't up front have harmful effects. Pornography up front doesn't have harmful effects. But it's later down the line when you think you believe that you are free from that thing, from marijuana, from weed, from pornography, from video games, until you try to stop. Sin feels like freedom until you try to stop. Straight up facts. Sorry, I got a roundabout here. I got to focus again. I don't know why I can't like focus when I'm doing these roundabouts and all that jazz. But, and man, marijuana, weed lovers would love to defend this stuff too, because they say like, oh, well, I can quit whenever I want. But man, they can't live without it. That's the thing. Can you live independently from it? A lot of them would say like, oh, of course I can. Like one time I stopped smoking for like 3-4 weeks or even a couple months. But they always go back into it. I quit pornography for 3-4 weeks, even a couple months. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're free from it. Because just like pornography, weed covers a facet of your life. It covers something in your life that you're missing. Like if you tend to lash out all the time, if you tend to be angry, if you tend not to handle stress very well, and maybe you don't know how to handle stress very well, then yeah, you're gonna fall on weed. You're gonna smoke heavily, or do whatever various weed products there is. I know there's dabs, there's I don't know, a whole bunch of crap. Okay, and also if you're I'll do one more, but also if you're willing, you got to be willing to address properly, for men and women, but especially women, especially, coming out with like the gym space where they're wearing like the very tight latex, yeah, or spandex, gym attire, if you want to say that. And it comes across as they're dressing very kind of provocatively. Like they are trying to provoke a response because they are highlighting features from their body, whether it's their chest or if it's their butt or whatever else. And, you might have used that to attract men at first, but it's kind of like you got addicted to the attraction because, now, and this is another problem too, is that it, in your brain, similar to pornography, it wires your brain to think of the relationship as transactional, okay? And I think this is another reason why a lot of women nowadays, especially in the gym, have a hard time holding down a relationship. I know not a lot of women would like to admit to that, but it's true. A lot of women wouldn't like to drop that part where they do tend to dress a lot more provocatively because it wires in the brain that, this is how love works. I just need validation from the man. That's all I need from him. And you see a lot of women even coming out and talking about this and gaining a lot of traction with it too, where they say like, well, the only thing you need from a man is validation. And they say that in various different forms. And they think they're winning in that way. They think they're winning in that way by treating men and really treating life as this very transactional thing. But really, the only thing they're winning is being alone and being isolated. This goes for men too, but this is, I'm just talking about women here. It really does go for women where, man, it's reinforced to no end as well on both sides, both men and women. Because you have men that kind of do simp for these women, hoping that, one day these women will, notice them. And women are kind of taking in all this reinforcement and all of this validation and saying like, man, I don't need a man. I don't need you. When in reality, now, like, especially in like the nursing space, you see like a lot of these nurses that did think that and that do think that grow very bitter. There's a lot of women my mom's age and my mom in general who do become miserable like that and who do actually, dress provocatively. There was this lady in the park who I approached not too long ago. I think it was like a few months ago, and she was meditating in the park. And I'm not gonna lie, she was dressed pretty provocatively. Yeah, she was wearing high-waisted, like cut-off jean shorts. But I figured like, well, I suppose I'll just kind of approach her and just kind of get to know her. And I approach her and I'm like, hey, like, are you like meditating or something? Like what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you meditating? And she goes like, yeah, actually I am. And she starts kind of going into it. I'm like, hey, can I like, sit down and this, that, and the other? And we start talking. She's a lot older than I thought. I thought I was approaching a woman that was close to my age, and from afar, it looks like, her skin isn't, I don't know what you want to call that, like just old. I'll just call it old skin, because, dude, you can tell when someone's old by their skin, and you can tell someone who's old, even though they don't have like the old skin look, but they oversaturate it with makeup. Side note. But anyway, so I'm sitting in the sand with this lady, and she's kind of talking about meditation, talking about spirituality. She's into like, she was into like a lot of the new age spirituality and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I'm kind of talking with her. Yeah. Okay. It just kind of hit me like, oh, she's like got to be like mid 30s, maybe even like 40 even. You know, she's talking about like a son this, she's having like troubles with her son, and like all due respect to her, I'm sure that is a trouble, you know, like a problem for her. But you know, that just goes to show that it carries on. Like it doesn't, you know, a lot of women think that, well, you know, I'll just settle down later. Man, it just doesn't work like that. Like you like, man, look at these, because there's role models, but there's also like anti-role models that you can still use as role models of what not to do. You know, a woman like that's still dressed provocatively in like their 30s and 40s, man, use them as an example of like what not to do. You know, like your intrinsic value doesn't come from, you know, if you can show off certain parts of your body. You know, there's other ways to look beautiful. You know, love shouldn't be transactional. So anyways, like we're talking, and I was like, oh yeah, you know, I'm like trying to get part of like more communities and such. And she's like trying to add me on different social media platforms, but I tell her I don't have any. Like I uninstalled all social media platforms. All I have is YouTube and Facebook. She's like, oh well, I'll add you on Facebook. So added her on Facebook. Fast forward a few weeks later, she like approaches me in the park a few times that same day. You know, I'm sure trying to like get to know me, but I'm trying to give off like subtle hints that I'm not, you know, exactly interested. So that just I just kind of let that fizzle out. But you know, just to add an example of woman dressing provocatively. You know, you think it's a power move, but yeah, it's really setting your future up for failure. So I think that's all I want to talk about. I think I'm gonna talk about woman for like the past 7 minutes now, but it is what it is. Anyways, I think that's all I gotta talk about. Yeah. Anyways, God bless.